Well, everybody, welcome to the Ziggy and Zarley podcast. We somehow made it to episode 3, but thanks to your loving support, we've had a great run so far. We're going to keep it going. I'm Paul Roper, and he is...
I'm Jim Merritt, here as always. Very excited about episode 3 tonight. Once again, returning to the lovely Erie Insurance Arena after hours. You know, big and scary and alone in here, Paul. Bad things could happen to us.
The lights could go out, which I'm fully expecting for that to happen before we wrap up our podcast. Did last time, but you know what? We keep the show going as long as we have power here. The power is now supplied from the suites, which are right behind us, that are right now fully have electric in it, which is great. I mean, it's coming along nicely. They just put up this wall behind us to separate the suites from the seats, and it's going to be very nice when it's all said and done. We're here after a tough loss for the Otters tonight, 7-2. The Otters were playing shorthanded. Plymouth Whalers, I'll tell you what, I would be very shocked if they don't play in tonight because this is a very good hockey team that we saw tonight.
Yeah, Plymouth just absolutely stellar right from the hop tonight. The Otters hung in for about the first 15 minutes. Actually got the first goal of the game from Harper, but I mean, just steamrolled from there. I mean, they had a couple of bad breaks, bad pinch on a up ice effort by Spencer Abraham leads to numbers going back the other way and a nice tic-tac-toe play, and then all of a sudden about 30-40 seconds later it's right back in the Otters net, and they're down 3-1, and they just seem to kind of collapse from there. So unfortunate to see that tonight. A lot of goals on the board, including a very nice one by Connor McDavid.
That got him 10 pounds of bacon.
It did indeed.
Not just any bacon, but Smith's bacon.
Smith's bacon. Was a very exciting Penguin ice crew night here in the building. We had Iceberg and the men and women of the Penguin ice crew from Consol Energy Center up visiting tonight. And also a Smith's hot dog promotion, where if you tweeted a picture of yourself enjoying a fine Smith's hot dog and sent that hashtag Pens Fan Night to the Smith's Twitter feed, they would actually enter you for a chance to win 2 pounds of hot dogs. So one was not enough. Somebody walked out of here with 2 pounds of hot dogs tonight.
I should have tweeted myself a picture, guy, because I would like to have 2 pounds of Smith's hot dogs. I'm from New York City. I'll tell you what, they make a fine hot dog. And we are in New York City, especially with pizza and hot dogs, we are very adamant about our Nathan's hot dogs. But Smith's, boy, it's a damn fine product.
It's a great hot dog. And I know personally, growing up in Erie, that Smith dogs are the only acceptable brand. Now, I've actually fallen to the dog side down in Pittsburgh and gone with some non-Smith brands. But even when my aunt used to live out in Baltimore, every time she'd come up to visit in Erie, she has to take home a whole cooler full of Smith products. So definitely think they should be a sponsor because
they are a sponsor.
Not with this podcast.
Not with this podcast. You know what? We're going to have to get on that. And I tell you what, I think Smith has to be very happy with Connor McDavid scoring the bacon goal tonight. Thanks to my friends at Epic Web Studios. They actually are the new social media people for Smith's. Just a few days ago, signed a deal with them, and they were able to make that happen. So because of Epic Web, got people to think about Smith's hot dogs tonight. People were tweeting pictures about Smith's hot dogs, eating them at the game, and Connor McDavid accepted the bacon challenge and scored a great goal. Unfortunately, it didn't result in a win, but you know what? He won't go hungry. I hope he enjoys that bacon. So Connor McDavid able to bring home the bacon, but not the 2 points tonight here. And here he has. The Otters fell 7-2. We'll talk a little bit more about the OHL right now. A team that right now is trying to go right in the playoff hunt. The Peterborough Petes. Peterborough Petes able to pick up a big win against the Ottawa 67s. Granted, the 67s are currently dead last in the OHL, but the Petes down 3-1. Were able to score 2 shorthanded goals in the third period, including one with a minute to go, to tie the game, and they wanted a shootout. Unfortunately for Peterborough, they lose tonight to Sudbury. And the Kingston Frontenacs, ending the 10-game winning streak of the Belleville Bulls. Frontenacs now have a 4-point cushion leading to their big matchup on Wednesday, but with all that aside, what a turnaround for the Peterborough Petes, who fired Mike Polina, the former Rangers assistant coach. Jody Hull, who recently signed a contract extension, steps in. This is a team that has looked really good in the second half. They might not make the playoffs, but certainly some hope for Petes fans out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when they came into Erie, they just didn't look good. I mean, the team was disorganized, didn't look like it had a lot of leadership, and to see them really turn it around and putting forth great effort is nice to see because, you know, as a Penguins fan, you know, Bob Airy from played for the Peterborough Petes when he was a young man. So always like to see the Petes do well, and so it's good for them. Hopefully they do get a run at the playoffs, but even not, definitely some hope out there for the Petes fans looking at a positive future, hopefully.
And as we segue from the OHL to the NHL, former Erie Otter Ryan O'Reilly, who spoke at great length over the first two podcasts, he said long live the offer sheet. Guess what? It happened. The Calgary Flames signing Ryan O'Reilly to an offer sheet. First year, not that big money. Second year, $6.5 million. They would have risked a first and a third-round pick. And Colorado matches the offer sheet, probably not within 2 or 3 hours of it going out. Quite a turnaround for a team that was struggling to re-sign what could be one of their star players. Ryan O'Reilly will, in fact, be a Colorado Avalanche once again. And boy, oh boy, what a big turn of events, because I thought there would have been a chance that Colorado would not have matched it. But you think if they had known what was just released today, that the Calgary Flames would have had to have waited for O'Reilly to clear waivers. If the Avalanche had not matched that offer because he played in the KHL, imagine if the Avalanche had figured out about that. Would they have kept him?
Honestly, I'm surprised that the Avalanche matched the offer. I thought $5 million was the limit for them. I thought that was over the limit, actually, for them. I thought any team that came in and offered $5 million cap hit, especially with that huge $6.5 million salary in the second year, which means he's still a restricted free agent. That means qualifying offers start at $6.5 million per season coming off of this 2-year contract. So I was greatly surprised to see that Colorado match, especially so quickly. I thought they would have taken the picks for sure, especially because Calgary's been awful this year. So you're looking at a really good first-round pick in a very loaded draft, and even a very early third-round pick could even be considered a late second that you're going to get, for letting a player that apparently you don't want very much on your team. Now, from the last podcast, I was talking about how the draft is a crapshoot and, take the player over the picks. But at this point, especially if they would have known that they might have given away their first and third round picks for nothing and watched Ryan O'Reilly skate on over to the Islanders or the Columbus Blue Jackets, I don't think there's any way that the Avalanche sign.
Yes, and with Calgary, they would have been without picks in the first 3 rounds. And also didn't have a pick in the 5th round. They would have only picked in the 4th, 6th, and 7th rounds had Colorado not matched the offer. And it's kind of funny. Calgary had a 3-0 lead after the first period last night, blew the lead and lost 5-4 in regulation. This is a team that is really struggling. They've had a lack of depth pretty much up and down the lineup. Their prospect pool is considered to be one of the worst throughout the NHL, and they're without their main goaltender, Mika Kiprusoff, who's still on the IR. Ryan O'Reilly could have been a big boost to them, but unfortunately for them, the offer sheet was matched with, then again, might have been a blessing in disguise because they would have had to give up a lottery pick and a third-round pick, and with the clearing waivers situation, I don't think there's any chance he would have cleared waivers. There would have been a team out there that would have picked him up just to spite Calgary. And I wouldn't say just to spite Calgary, but he's a player that could help you reach the salary floor, such for the Islanders, for example, or Columbus is another example. Ryan O'Reilly is now going to focus back on hockey with the Avalanche. I think the big question right now is, do the Avalanche trade him after the year expires? Because they cannot trade him for 1 year after he signs with the offer sheet.
Absolutely. This is the governor staying the execution for 1 more year. Ryan O'Reilly as Colorado Avalanche is still on death row. This is not going to continue into the future. They're not signing him after this 2-year deal. But now you have to think you're going to have to get something better in trade for Ryan O'Reilly than a first and a third pick. So Colorado's going to have to look at what they think the market is for Ryan O'Reilly once that 1-year limit is up. Because at this point, if you don't get a better return than a first and a third round pick and you paid him all this money, it doesn't look very good for the Craig Sherman there in the Avalanche GM seat. And that, brings me to some interesting points about Jay Feaster up there in Calgary acting as the general manager. Not making a lot of great moves up there either. So that whole Northwest Division has a serious issue with their general managers right now, with the goaltender situation in Vancouver, the Ryan O'Reilly mishandling here in Colorado, Jay Bouwmeester signing, pretty much anybody to any contract that they will take. Yeah, and then Minnesota coming off the wild off season, pun intended, with Ryan Suter and Zach Parise. So, and then of course Edmonton, they lose Taylor Hall tonight, out with a leg injury, left the game early, did not return. So, it's a weird situation up there in that Northwest Division, and it's going to just get weirder as the season rolls on.
No question. I'm sure by Jay Bowmeister you meant Jay Feaster.
I did indeed. I did indeed.
Who, of course, is a member of the Calgary Flames, but not in the front office. But anyway, big news is Ryan O'Reilly will be back with the Avalanche. He is expected to practice with the team tomorrow, and we'll see how much he produces this year. Now that they're basically a healthy Colorado team. Gabriel Landeskog back in the lineup after he was out most of last season. Matthew Shane was also hurt for a little while, so we'll see what Ryan O'Reilly does now that there actually is some center depth in Colorado. Ryan O'Reilly, remember, broke out last year because of the injuries to his fellow teammates. We'll see if he can match up that production again. But it is interesting. I do think Colorado could trade him, but I think because that contract is so high, that kind of limits the trade options, especially with that qualifying offer. He could basically end up as a rental for any team.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, with him still being a restricted free agent, you're still going to have his rights, but you're not going to want to tender him a qualifying offer because you're not going to want to pay him $6.5 million a year. So it really seems like it was a double-bladed sword going on up there, both with the offer sheet given by Calgary and the quick signing by Colorado. Just a strange situation. I'm not really sure why either team did what they did. Of course, I was a big proponent of the offer sheet. Very glad that it happened because, it was an awesome topic of conversation for 24 hours on Twitter and other social media. So definitely stirred a lot of emotions and a lot of things up, but I just can't wait for #AwkwardLockerRoom starting tomorrow morning out there in Colorado, because here's a guy where you're not sure if walking into that locker room, the arguments that he's had with management regarding David Jones, regarding T.A. Parenteau, regarding Matt Duchene's contracts, this information is not hidden. This is well known. This is out there in the public. People know that he felt he was lowballed because of the contract offers to those three players, and those three players are not making $5 million a year. They're not going to be making $6.5 million next year. So it's going to be a difficult situation for Ryan O'Reilly to step into. Luckily, he's a great kid, good work ethic, great work ethic, and captain material. So if anybody can diffuse a situation like that, I have full confidence that it's Ryan O'Reilly. But it's going to be an awkward morning tomorrow for that morning skate.
Oh, no question. So Ryan O'Reilly now back with the Colorado Avalanche. Another big story this week, and we talked about this player a lot as well on our last podcast. Alex Ovechkin ripped to shreds by Mike Milbury. Granted, Mike Milbury is a guy who traded away Roberto Luongo, made some awful decisions as Islanders general manager. Yet is considered one of the top pundits for the NHL. I wouldn't say considered, but he's getting paid to talk about hockey, which is upsetting because you're not. I actually am, because I do work for an OHL team, but
nobody's paying us to do this podcast.
I didn't trade Roberto Luongo away. I didn't make all those bad picks for the Islanders. Even though as a lifelong Ranger fan, I would have on purpose. But Mike Milbury ripping Alex Ovechkin. And the question is, was it warranted?
I mean, in that game, Alex Ovechkin was not exactly interested. He didn't look like he was very focused, didn't look like he really had much concern for what happened in that game. So I'm not going to sit here. I watched the game. I'm not going to sit here and say that Alex Ovechkin should be doing more when his team's getting blown out 4-0 and the writing's already on the wall late in the third. I mean, this is a game where the Capitals weren't ready to play, the Flyers were, and the Capitals actually had a good weekend. Came off a big win over New Jersey. Alex lights it up, hat trick, and that adds an assist, 4-point night. So thank you, Alex, for listening to the podcast. I'm glad that you took motivation from me ripping you in our segment last week, 2 weeks ago, about the unpopular decision of the week buying you out. So I'm glad to see you took motivation from that. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you'll take motivation from what Mike Milbury said as well, or hopefully you'll petition Ted Leonsis to pay the NHL a bunch of money to get rid of Mike Milbury, because that would really be the best scenario for everybody, is to have Mike Milbury no longer on our television set.
I would agree with that, and I think Mike Milbury's comments were quite good, but you can't take him seriously because of his track record. Now, if it's somebody like, say, Keith Jones, Ray Ferraro, Darren Payne, guys who I respect that I think do a great job in telecast that were saying things like that. I'd have no problem with it, but it's hard to take Mike Milbury seriously considering his job, or lack thereof, that he did with the Islanders.
Well, also considering the fact that he climbed into Madison Square Garden's crowd and beat somebody with a shoe, and also assaulted a 12-year-old in a minor hockey league practice. So, I mean, let's be honest here. Mike Milbury, we're taking pot shots because we can, because it's easy, and because it's funny, obviously. But the guy, he's not a great hockey mind, proven by his experience as the general manager of the New York Islanders. And his shock commentary, his trolling comments about players like Alexander Ovechkin, it's there for shock value. But there's better hockey insight available on other channels, and I would have much rather seen on #rivalry night, not a game between Washington and Philadelphia, two non-divisional foes that haven't met in the playoffs for like 2 or 3 years, when you have Montreal and Toronto on the same night, which turned out to be a much better game. And we're all subjected in the States to two United States teams because, the ratings. The ratings, if we put two Canadian teams on, no one will watch. Yeah, except for the fact that they have Phil Kessel, a great American player. They have a great American player in James Van Riemsdyk. I mean, this is a team in Toronto, Brian Burke's team that he made, that's very loaded with NHL talent that's from the United States and Canada. And, Montreal versus Toronto, that's the matchup on Ontario versus Quebec, French-speaking versus English-speaking Canada. It's a blood feud. It's hatred. It's a rivalry, and it's what should have been on Wednesday night.
Well, if those two teams get to respectability, which they are, Toronto has done very well this year. Montreal is having a lights-out year thanks to Carey Price, and don't forget they have two very good American players in Brian Gionta and Alex Galchenyuk, who I think will be on the Olympic team. Not for the next Olympics if NHL players are there, but I could definitely see him on the 2018 Olympic team for Team USA, as he is going to play for Team USA after his great performance at the World Juniors. There was questions whether he was going to play for Russia, even though he was born in the United States, but he chose America, and we're happy for that. And Alex Galchenyuk is part of the reason that Montreal's had some success. And I would have to agree with you there that I would have liked to have seen Montreal and Toronto, even put them on NHL Network. But unfortunately, they will look at the American media markets. Philadelphia is number 4. Washington's number 8 in the Nielsen ratings as far as markets are concerned. Montreal and Toronto are both Canadian cities, so they're not even in there. And it is disappointing because that game turned out to be a dog. But then again, who knew that Montreal and Toronto would be great? They are both teams expected to be out of the playoffs this year. Montreal is in last place in the Eastern Conference. Toronto has struggled over the past few years. Philadelphia and Washington, on the other hand, Philadelphia is a couple of years removed from a Stanley Cup final, and Washington has always seemed to have a strong team over the past years, but they've struggled this year, and even the Flyers haven't been as hot as people expected. So hopefully we'll see more Montreal and Toronto in the future. I think the last time Montreal-Toronto game was even on was when Air Canada Center opened.
Yeah, it might actually have been that long ago. How long has it been since there's actually been one Canadian team regularly in an NBC or NBC Sportsnet broadcast? I mean, it's always Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, Boston. Yeah, we get it. These are great hockey markets in the States for you to draw ratings from. But you're not expanding the game to people that only get nationally televised games. People want to see Vancouver. They want to see Edmonton. They want to see Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto. They want to see Winnipeg. God knows why, because nobody in Atlanta wanted to see them. But people want to watch the Thrashers, even if it's just to go, hey, look, that used to be the Thrashers. Remember how bad they were? Oh, they're still bad? Cool. But no, I mean, people want to see these teams, and you never get to see them in the States unless you buy the center ice package. And even if you do, most of the time you're not getting the games in HD. Between two Canadian teams, often get a standard definition broadcast. So it's just very disappointing to see the drive for ratings, which I know is what television and NHL hockey broadcasts need to be all about. But at the same time, if you want to expand the game to people that may be your casual fan that are tuning in for a rivalry night, you're going to get a better response out of a good game instead of the bottom Southeast team versus the bottom Atlantic team on a Wednesday night. I don't understand it.
Well, for all the bashing we did give Winnipeg in the last podcast, they've played better lately. They beat the Rangers at Madison Square Garden, always a tough task. They won at home against the New Jersey Devils in their last effort. So Winnipeg starting to get a little bit better. We'll see if it continues. Andrew Ladd has continued to do a terrific job in just putting the puck in the net, and Pavlik's actually been steady over the last few games. We'll see if that holds up, though. I don't think it will. But
Thanks,
you never
for listening to the podcast.
Yes, you never know what'll happen. So, more Canadian teams. In fact, a good blog you should check out, which I'm an avid reader of, being in sports media and hockey media at that. Puck the Media.
Very good, Steve Lepore.
Steve Lepore, who is a New Jersey boy like myself, a Queen of Peace alum, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't go to Queen of Peace, but 3 of my very good friends did, I believe, at the same time as Steve Lepore. I'll shout them out: Brian Sawich, Mike Merger, and Gary Fanning. 3 of my best friends from Seton Hall went to Queen of Peace School, which also produced Steve Lepore, who runs a great hockey blog at Puck the Media. If you want to know about the intricacies of the markets that get selected, the games that get selected, he breaks down every game that's aired on NBC Sports Network, has all the ratings. I tell you, if you're a hockey fan, it is a must-read blog. He started out of nothing, now works for SB Nation as a result. That is a great blog to read.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, I'm always following him on Twitter as well, at Steve Lepore, and, seeing the information that he's bringing about the ratings, especially, I believe, after that Pittsburgh-Philadelphia game to kick off the season. He was all over it with coverage about how that was one of the most-watched games coming back on national TV, one of the most-watched non-playoff, non-winter classic games, a regular season game in, I think 10 years or so. So, I mean, people were very excited when hockey came back, obviously Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. After the show they put on in the playoffs, the no goaltending show, no defense, all offense, all thrusters set to go. So I mean that's a big rivalry. Hey, here's a thought: Penguins Flyers rivalry night. I think we may have a genius on our hands.
I'm trying to remember what that quote unquote rivalry night game was. Barbara Walters almost stepped into the podcast. Minnesota, who'd they play a few weeks ago? The quote-unquote classic rivalry that I mocked about. But you look at the games that they've had for rivalry night, they haven't been all that great. I think part of the problem is it's on Wednesday. Now, it's great that they're trying to build a brand, but there hasn't been too great of games. Now, they did have Montreal-Boston on a few weeks ago, which is good. That is a classic rivalry. They've had some great playoff battles over the last few years. They've created a lot of unintentionally funny Jack Edwards moments as a result. And, that some of the matchups leave a little bit to be desired. And try and take a look real quick as to when the next rivalry night game is, which will be next Wednesday. But part of the problem is that you look at the schedule. Only 3 or 4 games are scheduled on Wednesday night. It's an off night for the NHL. It might as well be a Sunday night that these games are being shown. Well, let's see. Boston-Montreal was a good one. Boston coming from behind to win it a few weeks back.
Well, even after the Washington-Philadelphia game, they put on a secondary game, which was LA-Detroit. Not exactly a classic rivalry, but turned out to be a pretty good game. Unfortunately, for the 9-to-5ers like me out there, it was a little late for me to stay up and watch the game, but caught the highlights the next day. Andrei Kopitar with a nice move to finish that one off. So, I mean, that was a better game featuring 2 big markets, but unfortunately with it being a 10:30 start, a lot of people on the East Coast are going to go to bed before catching the second and even the third period of those games.
Much agreed there. Now, here's a classic rivalry for Wednesday. The Chicago Blackhawks, undefeated right now, against the Colorado Avalanche? What? When Ottawa-Toronto is playing the same night, the Canadian teams get the shaft again.
The Battle of Ontario subbed out for Chicago, Colorado, who, if I remember correctly, as a big Ryan O'Reilly fan and as a big Jonathan Toews fan, checking out some Colorado-Chicago games in the past 2 years, those do tend to be pretty good games. I remember there was one year, I think, where all 4 times the teams met, they went to a shootout. So, I mean, tight checking games, pretty good offense, so mostly 3-3s, 4-4 going into overtime. So, might actually turn out to be a good game, but definitely not what I would call a classic NHL rivalry.
That's right up there with Blue Jackets-Jets.
Blue Jackets-Jets, the Phoenix Coyotes, and the Vancouver Canucks.
Well, at least the game after is good. And even though the Flyers have struggled, Flyers-Devils, that's a classic rivalry. Just after Eric Lindros.
Yeah, and
he's still wondering where he is after Scott Stevens hit him in the Eastern Conference Finals in the late 90s.
Yeah, unfortunately, he ended up, I think, in Dallas and Toronto, so he spent a while wandering around not knowing where he was. But actually, that is a good matchup, especially with those two teams meeting in the playoffs last year, with the New Jersey Devils dispatching the Flyers after the Flyers made a mockery out of the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Indeed. And then we have the great battle between the Wild and the Red Wings in the Wild. I didn't even know the Wild had rivals. They haven't been around long enough to have a rival. Now, granted, you look at the other games, there's not much out there. And Dallas and Colorado's a stretch because I know that they had some decent playoff battles. If I'm not mistaken, in the 90s when both the Stars were good with Modano and the Avs had Sakic. But that is a stretch. Let's see what the 27th has in store. I'm almost afraid to click on it.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous for the both of us, but I guess the only rivalry about Minnesota versus Detroit is Detroit wanted Ryan Suter more than Minnesota. I don't know. That's about all I can think of to stir up bad blood there.
Yes, and fortunately, sanity is regained at the end of the month with Montreal-Boston.
There it is.
Here we go.
We might have to go back to the same game every week for rivalry night, but at least we'll find one good matchup out there.
Here we go, and usually it's Montreal-Boston. That'll be the second time they face off on Rivalry Wednesday, but hopefully that they'll switch things up for next season. But they are switching things up for next season. Realignment is all but approved. And the solution that they have, basically they said Detroit and Columbus, you'll both get your wish, even though it'll be much to the chagrin of the Eastern Conference because it'll be that much tougher for them to make the playoffs. We have 16 teams in the East, 8 in each division, 7 in each of the Western divisions for a total of 14 teams. 8 teams make the playoffs in both divisions, or both conferences, 3 from each division, plus 2 wild cards in each conference. And I say, even though it's unbalanced, I don't mind it. Baseball did it for a long time where it was uneven in the American and the National League. It'll be even this year with the Houston Astros going to the American League, where they'll lose at least 120 games, in my opinion, because they're terrible. They're a glorified Double-A team. But the realignment, all but approved. And what are your thoughts on it?
Well, my thoughts right off the bat is the unbalanced schedule sending both Detroit and Columbus over to the Eastern Conference is making way for when Detroit and Columbus will probably get shipped back to the Western Conference once they expand into Quebec City and into a second market in Toronto. So once we have that expansion and go up to 32 teams, I think Detroit and Columbus better save their tickets, hope they're round trip and not one way, because I don't think they're going to be in the Eastern Conference all that long. But I don't know that it's a good time for Detroit to come into the Eastern Conference. When a realignment was originally proposed, Nick Lidstrom hadn't retired, Pavel Datsyuk, Henrik Zetterberg weren't getting older, Johan Franzen had ligaments left in his knee. This is a team that's getting old, and they're getting slow, and they don't have a whole lot of defense. So, this is a team that the East is not known as being a tough conference according to, the way the Western Conference playoffs go, but there's a lot of skill teams, there's a lot of speed teams in the East, and with old and slow players, Detroit may find their trip to the East a little less pleasant than they had originally imagined.
Yes, and as a result, they are going to change the division names to an extent. I don't like it because if I gave that to my geography teacher, I'd fail geography with the way that these divisions are set up. The Atlantic Division, the Central Division, which features Montreal and Florida, if I'm not mistaken. Which, last I checked, we're both close to it. Florida's on the Atlantic Ocean. Montreal is pretty darn close to it. Not even close to being central. And you have the Midwest Division, which isn't even close to where it is in the Western Conference. And I think Pacific is the other one. But anyway, I think the NHL should at least consider, everyone says, Norris, Smythe, Adams, classic names. But I think that they should go modern. I would like to see the Gretzky division, the Orr division, the Lemieux division. And you could pull it off.
Division.
Yeah, the Howe division. I think you could pull it off. The Gretzky division could be the division with Edmonton or LA in it. The Orr division could be the division with Boston in it. You'd have the Lemieux division and the Howe division. I think they could pull it off, and I think it's something that they could consider. Be different. So what? And you know what? It's not like the Smythe and the Adams. Granted, they're classic names, but nobody knows who they are. Yeah. People know Gretzky. They know Lemieux. They know Gordie Howe. They sure as heck know Bobby Orr. He was signing autographs for the fans here in Erie back in Section 5, and never played a game on this rink, but they know who he is. And I think that the NHL should at least float the idea of not using geographic names because the geography is just terrible for what they're proposing. But I think that if you want to replace those names with legends, and not archaic legends, these are guys that are well-known, timeless legends, they should go for it.
Yeah, actually, especially when you think about, if you're a Pittsburgh Penguin, how badly do you want to win the Lemieux banner to raise that in your building? If you're a Boston Bruin, how badly do you want to win the Bobby Orr division? I mean, this is just pride you're playing for at this point. So, I mean, it gives a lot of extra incentive, and it goes the other way, too. How bad do you think the Flyers want to stick it to the Penguins and raise the Lemieux banner in their building? So, I mean, it works both ways. It's great for rivalries, and it gives new names, but familiar names instead of boring location titles. I hate that. Like in football, the Northeast Division, the South Mid. What are these things? Like, no one cares what these are. Call it like call it the Tom Brady division because he's always the only person that's ever going to win it. Like, it's just call him by something that people will recognize. It gives them more meaning. It gives fans more things to talk about, more things for pundits to argue about. And that's really what you want to do, is generate conversation about your sport.
I think it would be really awkward to see a Tampa Bay Lightning Central Division Champions banner. I would love to see them consider the idea of changing the division names because I don't like it. I like the way that the league is going to be set up. I don't mind like I say, I don't mind the uneven conferences, and I don't like the divisional names. They have to consider changing that. But the Islanders changing their mind on Rick DiPietro, and my unpopular thought of the week is that Rick DiPietro will play a game at the NHL again. It just won't be with the Islanders. What are your thoughts?
I agree with that. I think some teams willing to take a flyer on him, especially after the New York Islanders used their amnesty buyout on him, which is pretty much all but definite at this point. Actually, they may actually go with a regular buyout because they want that cap hit because they don't like to pay money to players that actually play for the team. So they're currently, they gave up a second-round pick for the rights to Tim Thomas. I think they're still paying Alexei Yashin, even though he's been out of the league for a decade. But the thing is that the really sad part about the Rick DiPietro story is the comments that he made to a reporter and how badly they got spun out of control in a short period of time. Obviously, he's very upset. It's not really his fault. People get hurt. People go through freak injuries. Sometimes, the way you play or the way you practice or the way you stretch or train, you can make it worse for yourself. But at the same time, this is a nice guy. And everybody, myself included, I will shamelessly raise my hand and say I was part of the problem. I was killing Rick DiPietro every chance I got. From the moment he signed that stupid contract to Brent Johnson one-punching him in the face and breaking his face. He broke his face. Now, if that's not an injury-prone player, I don't know what is. But at the same time, to see him jeered, to see him run out of town, to see him even flippantly making a comment that suicide was a possibility for him at one point. I mean, it's a horrible thing to hear a player feel that awful about things that are said about him in the media, on social media, on Twitter. So, Rick DiPietro, take your buyout, accept your large pile of money, and go back to work. Go work on your game, train, get better. You were a great goaltender once. That's why they gave you that contract. Find that player again, and you will be back in the NHL.
I hope he does too. Granted, I made fun of the Islanders earlier. I'm a lifelong Rangers fan, but with DiPietro, I hope that he regains his footing because he was someone that gave the Islanders a little bit of swagger when he was on his game. It's something they're kind of lacking right now, but unfortunately he had that big contract, and here's the other thing too. I don't think it's his fault that he signed the contract. It's Charles Wayne's fault for giving him that contract in the first place. If I got a 15-year contract with all that money, I don't care how good or bad I am. I'm signing that contract. I'm set for 15 years. I don't blame Ricky one bit for signing that contract. Unfortunately, his comments were taken out of context.
Well, I was just going to say, who signed him to that contract? Who was the general manager of the Islanders when they signed him?
No.
Was it Garth Snow?
It was Garth Snow, not Mike Milbury. I wish we could blame him.
I was really hoping to throw Milbury under the bus one more time, but no, I mean, as we talked about with Bobby Holik and his $10 million contract from the Rangers, you're not going to say no to it. If you get offered $67.5 million to play for the Islanders for 15 years, yeah, you're stuck on the Islanders, but at least you have a lot of money for another 15 years.
So Rick DiPietro goes to the Bridgeport Sound Tigers, and unfortunately for him, just got shellacked. Gave up 5 goals on 12 shots against the Connecticut Whale and was pulled after the first period. Whale won 7-3 over the Sound Tigers. Those are rivals. Those are just like Islanders Rangers. They're parent teams.
Yeah.
Connecticut Whale, who actually have signed a 3-year extension to stay in Hartford, which is good for the Rangers and good for Hartford. And also signed a 3-year extension to stay in the AHL. The Hamilton Bulldogs remaining in Hamilton and signed a 3-year affiliation deal with the Montreal Canadiens.
Does that mean 3 more years of the Brass Bonanza? Fingers crossed?
Yes. They are the Connecticut Whale after all, which is great that they still play Brass Bonanza there. And it's amazing how they just completely changed the whole scheme of the team midway through the season, which they did a couple of years ago. The last time that really happened, not changing the name of the team, but the Pittsburgh Penguins actually changed their colors, I believe, in the 79-80 season, after the Steelers and the Pirates each won their respective championships. Because as everyone remembers, now you see it now with their throwback uniforms, but their colors used to be blue, a light blue, and white. And then they became black and gold as a result in 1979-80. The Boston Bruins threatened to sue, saying they had a monopoly on those colors. Obviously thrown out of court, and the Penguins are known as Vegas Gold and Black now.
Yeah, I don't know how you can have a monopoly on colors when there aren't that many of them to go around in the NHL. I mean, every single team has a third jersey that's black, so whoever had the first black jersey should, file about 14 lawsuits because they could get half the league on that charge. Somebody should sue the Islanders for those third jerseys just because they're hideous. The only thing that I'm worried about is if Phoenix does relocate, which is looking likely with the ownership situation out there still being a mess. I like the Phoenix third jerseys, the jumping coyote, the little paw print on the shoulders, the black jersey. I like that one. I know it's not a popular one out there, but if I actually knew Phoenix was going to stay, I might take a flyer on an Oliver Ekman-Larsson or a Zbigniew Mahalik black third jersey for the Phoenix Coyotes. That's a sick jersey in my opinion.
I actually do like the Coyotes jerseys. I have a white one myself, Shane Doan with the captaincy on it. I'm glad that Shane Doan is still a Phoenix Coyote. It's good to see that some players have some loyalty here in the NHL nowadays, but there's another situation with the Phoenix Coyotes. Looks like they're probably going to relocate despite the efforts to keep them there, which is unfortunate. Really nice arena in Glendale, which I visited. I saw a Canucks game a few years ago, hoping to see Roberto Luongo. It was one of the 5 games that Curtis Sanford started that year. All the snowbirds were so upset. All the relocated people from British Columbia that were spending their winters in Arizona did not get to see Roberto Luongo. Canucks won anyway. The Coyotes were not very good that year. This was while Wayne Gretzky was coaching them. So that was a fun experience, though. It's a nice arena, jobbing.com arena, and hopefully they'll sort things out in Phoenix, as the Coyotes right now are still in limbo, as they have been for 5 or so years. But the team that's not in limbo, the Chicago Blackhawks, 21 games in a row, as they win against the Blue Jackets in overtime, 4-3. Is there any stopping this Blackhawks team? I have a feeling, if they're going to lose regulations in single digits this year, because this is a team that is firing on all cylinders right now. You throw Sugar Ray Emery in net, they win anyway. He's having a renaissance year. Corey Crawford comes out once again. Ray Emery is going to come in to save the day. What a team they have there in the Windy City.
Yeah, it's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, you're going to get great performances out of a guy like Jonathan Toews, out of a guy like Marian Hossa, but to see the performance they're getting out of Patrick Kane this year, he has just been lights out. So talented, so impressive this year. So it's gonna take something miraculous almost at this point for the Blackhawks to lose in regulation. And I don't know if you can pop up their schedule for the next few games. Let's see what they have in store, but it would have been a nice feather in the cap for the Columbus Blue Jackets to put that streak down tonight, but unfortunately they were not able to do it. Good for Columbus though, squeezing out a point. Always useful in that tough Central Division. But the Blackhawks, with the way they're playing right now, is almost going to take an injury or Ray Emery to look in the mirror and realize he's Ray Emery and not the second coming of Grant Fuhr to figure out how to stop this Blackhawks team. The effort is there every night. the desire to win, the desire to just embarrass other teams, outskate, out-hit, outplay every night. So I don't know what Coach Q's putting in the water down there in the dressing room, but if it's speed or heroin, every other team's going to want to line up for that bandwagon.
The Blackhawks get another win tonight. Their upcoming schedule at Detroit on Sunday, Minnesota Tuesday the 5th, and then home and home with Colorado, which includes a big rivalry game on Rivalry Wednesday against the Avalanche. It'll be broadcast nationally on NBC Sports. Hey, at least you get to see the Blackhawks all over the country if you don't have center ice.
And I believe that Sunday game against Detroit is the NBC game of the week on Sunday. So I think that's a 12:30 start. That'll be available on national TV as well. Of course, this podcast may not be up until after that game actually goes.
We hope it is.
We will try our best to get this one up for you. But
this might be your pregame right now.
Yeah, you can pregame. Not that you would know that until you got to this point in the podcast, but go back and looper yourself and make sure you listen to this before the big Blackhawks-Detroit game this Sunday on NBC.
And then they'll close out next week at home against the Edmonton Oilers. So those are that's the Blackhawks schedule over the next week or so, and a team that right now is just hard to beat right now. And nobody's beaten them yet, at least in regulation. They do have quite a few overtime and shootout losses. So,
but if you're Chicago, do any of those teams scare you? Does that five-sum of Detroit, Minnesota, 2 games against Colorado, any of that really putting any fear in your heart?
Not really. I mean, Detroit's beatable. We know Minnesota's been beatable this year despite the additions of Parise and Suter. Colorado definitely beatable, but who knows what they'll look like with Ryan O'Reilly back in the lineup, because they'll surely be playing by Wednesday.
Oh, sure.
The Edmonton Oilers, they're a team you cannot sleep on. I thought they did a heck of a job on Dallas on Thursday night. 5-1 win over the Dallas Stars. They actually blew a 2-0 lead against the St. Louis Blues Friday night. Lost 4-2. Edmonton's a team you can't sleep on right now. So, I mean, you never know. But then again, Chicago, they're playing with a team. They're possessed. Plus 27 goal differential in 20 games.
Yeah, it's insanity. And you also got to remember that Taylor Hall did go out tonight, so it may not be a full-strength Edmonton Oilers when they do play Chicago next week. But also at the same time, you do have to remember this is the Edmonton Oilers that doesn't have defense or a goaltender. So there's that. I wouldn't want to put Patrick Kane, Patrick Sharp, Jonathan Taves, Marian Hossa. I'm not feeling confident if I'm Edmonton with those 4 guys coming down the ice at me, and my number 1 defenseman is Ryan Whitney.
And speaking of that plus 27 goal differential, next closest team, Anaheim, plus 16.
Yeah, Anaheim's right on their heels, despite the fact that Chicago has won so many games, got points in every game. Anaheim's not far off the pace. How many points are they behind right now?
They are 8 points behind.
It was only 2.
But with 2 games in hand.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it was only 2 a week ago, and they've been playing great hockey, too. I swear Teemu Selanne just gets younger every game he plays. I think he's the NHL's Benjamin Button. He'll be playing until he's 75 when he, goes back to being a 10-year-old. But Teemu Selanne, the man, the myth, the legend. I don't know what's going on with Finnish players. Him, Sami Salo. It's a crazy, crazy world when you have guys of that age still producing at that level.
And you actually they're playing as we speak right now. They're winning 3-0 are the Ducks over the Wild. And Teemu Selanne has a goal. He is the ageless wonder, Teemu Selanne. And if they win tonight, they'll be 6 points behind Chicago, which is quite impressive considering how good Chicago has been. But the Ducks, they don't lose much either. They're 14-3-1, could be 15-3-1 after we are finished wrapping up here tonight, as they are taking on the Minnesota Wild. And Teemu Selanne continuing to impress now, 6 goals this season, plus a number of assists, which is quite impressive at his age. And taking a look at the standings right now, a team that is right on the heels of the Ducks, although not quite there yet. The defending Stanley Cup champion Los Angeles Kings looks like they're finally breaking out of their slump. They've won 5 in a row. Things are starting to come together for Darryl Sutter's squad.
Well, thank goodness, because I would hate to have seen this be the year where we had the Stanley Cup champions go on to miss the playoffs. I mean, that's just terrible. You want to see that rivalry. You want to see that, especially if they play in the playoffs, any of the teams that they beat in order to win the Cup last year. I mean, that's stuff you want to see in the playoffs this year. So who knows? Maybe they're on pace to sneak in as the 8th seed again and just completely turn the tables in the Western Conference one more time.
And we'll see what happens with the LA Kings, whose offense is starting to get in shape. John Quick has played better, and Jonathan Bernier has been there to spell him. So the LA Kings, fresh off of that Stanley Cup from last year, stumbled out of the starting gate, but now have managed to win their last 5 in a row, and they are 7 points out of the top spot in the Pacific, and I believe just inside the playoff picture, trying to pull up those conference standings right now. Very tight, as you would expect in both conferences. The LA Kings are tied for 7th place. They're actually in the 7th spot. They have a game in hand on Minnesota. Minnesota is 8th. San Jose is off to a great start right now outside the playoff picture. That's hard to believe, but I'm not a big fan of the loser point in overtime, but it's changed things up this year with this shortened season. That loser point did not exist in the last lockout season of 94-95, or shortened season, I should say, of 94-95. But teams are still in the thick of things. I mean, you look even at Calgary, who we made fun of earlier. They're 4 points out of a playoff spot in spite of not looking all that impressive. 4 points out of a playoff spot.
Yeah, and they're still 14th in the West, so that just shows you how crazy the playoff standings are going to be. And it's going to be a big deal when we get to the end of March here for the trade deadline, because you may have 25 buyers and 2 sellers. There's not going to be a lot of teams that are completely out of the running by the end of the month. If Calgary's only 4 points out right now, there's a chance that they're only going to be 10, 12 points out by the end of the month if they can string together some wins. So who's going to sell off their players? Who's going to be the teams that are salary dumps and all that stuff for the playoff run this year, rental players, all that stuff. So it's going to be very interesting to see if there's anybody out there who's willing to part with some players, because with there being so few sellers, the prices are going to be sky high for any talent.
Absolutely. And switching over to the Eastern Conference, the Washington Capitals, they're in last place. They are 6 points out of a playoff spot, which is held by the Winnipeg Jets, the 8th spot, with a game in hand. That means they could be 4 points out of a playoff spot if they win that game in hand. It is just insane how tight that the conferences are in this short season so far, about to reach its midway point. The team just above Washington in the standings, the Buffalo Sabres, since we last talked to all of you, had Lindy Ruff as head coach. He's no longer the head coach. Ron Rolston is in his place. And right now the Sabres are trying to turn the corner. They've won their last 2, but even then have still struggled to try and find the net.
Yeah, I mean, other than Thomas Vanek, who I believe was on the ice for every single goal scored in their first 10 games. I think they scored 21 goals in their first 10 games, and he was on the ice for all of them. Didn't necessarily have a point on all of them, but was actually physically on the ice every time they scored. So when you're getting 0 secondary scoring, not getting much from the back end, even with that huge contracts for Ehrhoff and Myers, they just need some secondary scoring. Jason Pominville, where are you? Are you alive? Are you coming home anytime soon? I mean, you're the captain of this team.
The population of Pominville has gone down the latest census.
Yeah, it's dwindling at this point. I mean, it's been named as the top 5 cities in America not to live in. So Pominville needs to come back and start playing better. Vanek's doing everything he can, being a dark horse MVP candidate right now, just putting up tons of points and trying to keep the Sabres alive, keep them afloat. And if Ryan Miller can find his game, stop some pucks, and they can get some scoring out of anybody on that team, they could string together a few wins and get back into this playoff race. They're not far out now, 4 or 6 points, something like that. So, I mean, they do have an opportunity to make that happen, but it's going to take a lot of effort.
They're just 4 points out of the playoff spots. You got it right in the head there as the Buffalo Sabres make the coaching change, and Ron Rolston comes in the place of Lindy Ruff, who, granted, I've been hard on Lindy Ruff over the past few years. I thought he should have been gone long ago, but I do think he'll find another job again.
Yeah, this is going to be a Randy Carlyle, Bruce Boudreau situation. As soon as he wants to work again, he will. I believe he had 2 years left on his deal with the Sabres, so if he wants to relax, take a couple of years off, hang out with his family, do the things you don't get to do as an NHL coach, then he may choose to do that. But as soon as he wants a job, he'll have one. He's a great coach. I mean, it was time for a change in Buffalo, but he's still a great coach. And it actually puts a lot of coaches on the hot seat around the NHL, because now there's somebody out there that can replace him and do either as good or better of a job. So any of these struggling teams that the coaches weren't necessarily on the hot seat before, because who are you going to replace them with? Well, now Lindy Ruff's sitting out there. So you got to think some of these teams in the bottom of their divisions thinking about a coaching change. That idea got a lot more appealing when you realize that Lindy Ruff is available to slot in.
Somewhere Todd Richards is worried.
Very, very worried.
I think that is a J.D. Yarmo guy. I could see Lindy Ruff with the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And I mean, when J.D. did come in, he cleaned house. Scott Housen is now gone, which comes as no surprise to anyone. Scott Housen should never even have been allowed to make the Rick Nash trade. I mean, they had Craig Patrick there as an associate, consultating some sort of title that no one ever knows what it means. But they really should have just given Craig Patrick the interim job until Yarmo was available. But I mean, this is not a surprise. Columbus not setting the world on fire again for how many seasons in a row now. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a move made there, and Lindy Ruff certainly does seem to be a J.D. Yarmo kind of guy.
So a rookie coach in Buffalo with Ron Ralston, who is actually the brother of Brian Ralston, has a very fine NHL career. We head to the rookie report, and Corey Conacher is still leading the way with 18 points for the Tampa Bay Lightning as leader amongst rookie scorers, although Jonathan Huberdeau is starting to come on lately for the Florida Panthers. Him and Drew Shore, 13 points for Huberdeau, 10 for Shore. And even though the Panthers have struggled to string together some wins, boy, they've got some great talent in their system. I still think they're a team that's on the verge of breaking out over the next few years, especially after winning the division last year and almost beating the Devils in the first round of playoffs. They were in overtime goal away from going to the second round.
Heard you about it, Henry? No, I mean, and Jonathan Huberdeau has a very, very great skill set. I mean, this kid is just talent on talent on talent. He came in on that penalty shot, made it 3-0 against Ilya Humongous Big Brizgalov. And, I mean, just a sick set of moves. Backhand, forehand, backhand, around, toe drags around the poke check and puts it 5-hole. I mean, that's just an unbelievable goal. And anytime that you can get Ilya Brizgalov so mad that he throws his stick over the goalie cage into the wall behind him, if there's a God somewhere out there, Jonathan Huberdeau did a little circle around the net and went, "It's only hockey, you know. It's only game. Why do you have to be mad?" So if there's a God out there, Jonathan Huberdeau, if you ever score on Ilya Brizgalov and make him throw a stick again, chirp him and chirp him immediately.
It took until the third podcast when we got the Ilya Brizgalov impression out there, thanks to Jonathan Huberdeau, who has not had a point in his last 4 games, but still is a player that impresses me very much. He is going to be a great player down the road for the Florida Panthers, a great player for the St. John Sea Dogs for 3 seasons, had 72 points in 37 games of them this year. Ridiculous numbers, but Q numbers you'd expect from a great player in the Q, because they always offense in the Q. Amazing for Jonathan Huberdeau, the 3rd overall pick in the 2011 draft.
Yeah, well, you actually saw here in Erie tonight a unbelievable point scorer in Vince Trocheck for Plymouth Whalers. I don't know why their name just completely disappeared out of my head there for a second, but Pittsburgh native came in tonight with 91 points on the season and added 4 more here tonight, 2 goals, 2 assists. So, I mean, this guy's putting up video game numbers. He's got 95 points, I think, in 56 games. I mean, this is incredible scoring, even in the OHL.
Can you imagine that line in the future? Huberdeau, Short, and Trocheck. Because Trocheck is a Panthers prospect. They've got some great prospects. And Trocheck might only be the 10th best prospect. That's how scary the Panthers could be. They have a great farm system, and hopefully things will turn around for them in the near future. And Jonathan Huberdeau is certainly leading the charge with Drew Shore as he tries to turn things around. So those are some of the forwards to watch out for in the rookie report. The defense led, obviously, by Justin Schultz, who's part of that young bright group with the Edmonton Oilers. Now, -4 rating aside, I'm not a big believer in the plus-minus system anyway. Justin Schultz has been as advertised. He was a player who decided not to sign with the Ducks. Lots of teams were going after his signature. The Oilers came out on top, and it looks like he's a guy that could lead their blue line for years to come.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a phenomenal player, and he actually got the opportunity to play with the three kids there, Everly Hall and Nugent Hopkins, with the farm club there, but while the lockout was going on. So you wonder if there's a little fatigue playing into that now with them playing many more games than most of the NHL, who was on an extended break. So you wonder if injuries like the one Taylor Hall suffered tonight are fatigue related. May have just been a freak incident, but looks like he had a leg injury, lower body listed going out tonight. So Justin Schultz, though, great puck moving, great shot, just a really talented player, and was going to be a great asset for whoever got his signature on that dotted line.
And it was the Edmonton Oilers, and here's the scary thing about Everly and Schultz when they were with the Oklahoma City Barons this year. Everly 51 points in 34 games. Schultz was 48 in 34 games before they both went back to the Oilers following the end of the lockout. Everly is still tied for third in scoring in the AHL. He hasn't played there in a month and a half. Justin Schultz is seventh, and I believe still leading defenseman, which is just insane. And the sad thing is that Oklahoma City had those great players. They still don't draw, which is sad. You would have thought that fans would flock out to see him, but unfortunately the market is kind of saturated with the Oklahoma City Thunder. I always thought that Oklahoma City could be that hidden NHL market, kind of like Nashville was, because the Blazers drew well in the CHL. But for some reason or another, fans have not been attracted to AHL hockey there. Justin Schultz, by the way, still leading defenseman in points by 13 points over TJ Brennan and Mark Barberio. Brennan, I believe, is at the NHL level, if I'm not mistaken, with Buffalo. Yeah. Barberio still playing with the Syracuse Crunch. Schultz is leading it by 13 points, which is just amazing. So it's just amazing to see what they did there with Oklahoma City now is translated to the NHL level, and it's good for him, even though there are certainly a lot of Ducks fans that aren't too happy with the shenanigans that he pulled in order not to report there and then get the great contract with the Oilers.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you haven't checked out the show Oil Change on the NHL Network, it does describe a lot of their time in Oklahoma City, especially the Big Four there, and also some other familiar faces, some Edmonton draft picks also spending some time in Oklahoma City. So if you haven't had a chance to catch that show, do catch it. Very entertaining. The kids are very charismatic. You like listening to them talk. You like seeing them hang out with each other on the bus, and they're always working. Those kids. They were even on the bus. They had monitors up on the side of the bus, watching themselves play, and analyzing with their coach what they were doing wrong, what they could do better, and so it's great to see kids that instead of popping in their PS Vitas or playing games on the back of the bus, playing SOCOM on the plane, that they're actually taking time to study up and do some homework while they're in transit. Of course, that may have just been the cameras. As soon as those stopped rolling, the six-pack and the Vita rolled out, but you never know.
I have not seen the show. I haven't seen Oil Change, but do they have my phone is blowing up right here. I think it's trying to tell us that we should wrap it up, but anyway, do they have a sleeper bus there?
It looked like it. Looked like they had on the bus a lot of overhead cots that would fold down, but there was a lot of couches. It was a really interesting bus. So if for nothing else, check out how AHL players travel with the giant bus on the road, because it was neat. A lot of fold down things. You have players sitting up above on their cots, hanging their heads over the bed to watch the video being played on the side of the bus. So really just a strange-looking scenario on that bus, but a very interesting way to travel, and I'm sure they're very happy to be up in Edmonton in uncharted plains.
Absolutely. With free buffets. I was told by a friend of mine who broadcasted games of the NHL for a few years, just amazing buffets on the plane. You eat everywhere you go. And actually, Coach Sidorkovich told me the same thing. I mean, they just eat everywhere. So we'll see what happens with Justin Schultz for the remainder of his career. He could possibly play in as a potential Calder Trophy candidate. But, we spent just about an hour with you fine folks. Another fine edition. You have any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Well, it's always nice to talk. I did want to get a little bit with the rivalry week and realignment here. With the Penguins actually ending up trading Jordan Staal in their own division as Carolina will be joining the Penguins in that division. So we're going to be seeing a lot of Jordan Staal against the Pittsburgh Penguins, much to my chagrin, as it was very, very tough watching Jordan Staal in that red jersey take apart the Penguins the other night. So I was not happy to see that. Did also want to give a shout-out to a great listener of ours at Caniac Kaz, JC, big Hurricanes fan down there, big Brandon Sutter fan. She said her main complaint about the podcast is always the lack of Brandon Sutter content. So I at least wanted to get his name popped in here a couple of times. Playing well for the Penguins, had a very big goal to tie the game against the Flyers. And then Vokoun stopped being human and just fell apart and laid on the ice as the goal went in. And they lost that game, unfortunately. But Brandon Sutter getting introduced to the Penguins-Flyers rivalry and playing a lot of key minutes and doing a lot of great things for the Penguins. So there's your Brandon Sutter update for the week. And any final thoughts for you, Paul?
Brandon Sutter is my favorite Sutter, over Ron Sutter.
Wow.
Over Ron Sutter. So, I thought the Rangers played a great game against the Lightning yesterday. Got an opportunity to watch them play. They just dominated the Lightning. But I got to give props to Matthew Garon, because if it wasn't for him, the Rangers could have won that game 10-1. But, you know what? Much love for the full right goalies. I love my goalies that can catch with the right hand, and Matthew Garon did a great job. That's why I think I'm a fan of Rick DiPietro, because he has that stick on the left hand. Not too many goalies like that. Jonas Hiller, Steve Mason, Jose Theodore. Much love to the full right goalies out there, because that's how I play goal.
Yeah, sounds good.
You always like, you know what? You go up the ice, you expect the goalie to have the glove in the right hand. Well, wait a minute, or glove on the left hand, excuse me. And, wait a minute, let's turn around. That could throw off an offense.
It does, and it has in the past. I've seen games where a right catching goalie has come up from the minors and completely stymied an NHL offense because they hadn't seen him before, didn't know where he was vulnerable, didn't know where to beat him. And if you're a sniper that likes to go high glove side, and now you got that knob of the stick sitting in your way the whole night, it's difficult to get adjusted and switch over to the other side of the net. So you always got to look at those as the opportunities that as we're having some technical difficulties here, folks. But to take those,
drop the mic. Sorry.
As we take those opportunities to try to go side to side and open up the wickets on goaltenders with the awkward catching hands. So that's our pro tip for the young players out there. If you're confused about where to shoot because the goalie has his glove on the other hand, get him moving side to side, open up that 5-hole, and flip her right on inside.
There you go, and good call, Thomas Vokoun. I don't know how you could forget him after we mentioned him a few minutes before. And also throw out some love to Grant Fuhr and Tony Esposito, both Hall of Fame goalies who caught with their right hand.
Absolutely.
So that'll wrap it up for the Ziggy and Zarley podcast. We kept it to under an hour and a half today, but we thank you so much and for listening. And also big thanks to Jeff Merrick, who has shown us some love. And we know Jeff Merrick's a big Otters supporter. Ryan O'Reilly's one of his favorite players. I'm sure he'll be happy just as we are to see him back on the ice this week with the Colorado Avalanche. And it's going to be another fun week of hockey coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Big shout-out to Jeff Merrick. It's been always great. He's actually my inspiration for the podcast. Listening to his podcast with Greg Wyshynski of Yahoo's Puck Daddy, hashtag MVSW. You can find that on iTunes. Definitely recommend it. If you're not listening to that podcast, start. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal podcast. And one of my favorite Jeff Merrick quotes, I get paid to talk about hockey for a living. Why wouldn't I always be happy? I'm stealing money. So that is my inspiration to get into the hockey podcasting, broadcasting, and hockey talk world. So a big send-off, a big cheers to Jeff Merrick here at the end of the podcast. Thank you for all your kind words on the Twitter and for all you do in the hockey world. So
yes, thank you very much, Jeff, and Puck Daddy himself, Greg Wyshynski.
Hey, if you guys aren't busy and you want to come hang out and be on the podcast, we tape really weird hours, so I'm sure you'll be available.
We'll get to meet Connor McDavid.
We'll bring you McDavid.
We'll bring you McDavid. We'll bring you the bacon. Yeah. 10 pounds of bacon will be coming your way. I think, I know Greg will do it for that. So we'll see what happens with that. And again, until next time, this is Paul Roper.
This is Jim Barrett.
Take care of yourself and each other.